Hello, I'm Burke Franklin, co-founder and partner of Prepping for the Sharks. Welcome to our new show today. With me today is our partner, Robert Browning, who's also the founder and CEO of Success Solutions. He's all about growing organizations, relationships, and people with business development mastery, enlightened leadership practices, and personal transformation. He's going to introduce his longtime friend and our guest today.
Thanks, Bert. It's a pleasure to be here. Yeah, longtime friend is correct, and I consider Terry Brown the fastest run in the West. How you doing, Terry?
I'm real well today. Thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, Terry Brown is the owner and president of Charles River Group. The Charles River Group, also known as CRG, is a regional boutique recruiting firm specializing in executive and technical search. And for more information about Terry, you can go to charlesrivergroup.com. He's been doing this for over 20 years. He's got a 97% retention rate, and he guarantees his positions for a year. And it's amazing what he's able to do to get that retention rate. We'll learn a few things today. And he's been dealing with companies from 20 to over 2,000 employees. So Terry, what's a guy like you doing in this business?
Well, like most people, there's no recruiting college to go to. And I've casually surveyed people over my 25 years in recruiting, 5 for someone else and 20 on my own. And I would say probably anywhere between 70 and 80% got into the industry because they met someone that was already a recruiter, which is what happened to me. And I did cut my teeth the hard way. I worked with a foreigner who had poor English skills, poor management skills, poor people skills, but I learned how to be, as you quoted, the fastest gun in the West because he demanded volume. And I mixed that with my quality control over a number of years. And what you see now is the finished product.
So when someone's starting a business, I was thinking many of our readers or well, from my business, they buy my business plan builder, business planning software, for example, to raise capital. And they need, of course, to bring a team in because the investors want to see a team. They don't want to just see one person. How do you get started even finding people to work with you?
Well, to keep it simple, what I tell clients to do, because there's a million different ways to fry an egg, but what I tell people to do is when you're deciding to start a company or you have a new opening in your company, you pick out, just get a piece of paper out or your laptop or tablet and put down the 5 characteristics you want in this person. And it's not just honesty and professionalism and those things, but the other things like maybe they need to have a tough skin, or maybe they need to be a little more empathetic. And then on the other side of that list the critical skills you need. If it's going to be a CPA or an accountant, do they need a CPA? Do they need a CIM? Do they need a CMP? And if so, where are you willing to flex? And then you have to figure out of the 5 personal attributes and the skills you want, what's the best mix? And I coach kids and I coach candidates and clients for over 30 years. I always aim for perfection. So if I was going to hire someone, I want to find the perfect person, but guess what? There are no perfect people. What's the next best thing? I'm in central and northern Wisconsin and Minnesota. A lot of these companies don't always demand a bachelor's degree or an engineering degree or an MBA, but what's the next best thing? So when you prioritize those, you make that list. And then as you evaluate your candidates, you have the flexibility to decide what's more important as you go through the process because there's a learning curve. It's a learning curve for the recruiter and or the business owner and or the applicant, the candidate. So you can't say they have to have this, and this. It's what I'd like them to have, but in some situations they won't have that, and you make amends and you find the best fit based on the personality characteristics and also on the skill sets that they have.
So is it a list of 5 personal characteristics plus a list of 5 professional characteristics?
Correct.
It
depends on the job. If it's a bricklayer, well, they have to know how to lay bricks. They have to be able to walk and talk. They need to be able to follow direction. They need to be able to measure, which I'm bad at measuring, so I'm not going to be a bricklayer. But it really depends on the level of position. I'm speaking more so from a senior level job, but It doesn't matter if it's a customer service person or a president or someone in between. You have to know what you want before you start looking for it.
So Terry, it's all about with your recruiting to also retain them so that you have that great batting average. And I know one of your specifics is you meet in person with everyone, even if it means you have to travel. Why is that?
Correct. Well, number one, employers are giving me hopefully a nice fee for the search. let's just say it's a $150,000 a year job. That's call it a $30,000 fee. A lot of recruiters are lazy. Robert, you know me a little bit. I am not. I've flown down to Florida. I've flown to Detroit. I've flown out west and out east because I'm offering 1 year guarantee and I want to know what this person's like eyeball to eyeball. You can do Zoom, you can do a bunch of other things, but as my 8th grade teacher, Mr. Sullivan, said at my good old Catholic school in Massachusetts, the easiest thing to do is the wrong thing to do. So it's easier to hop on a call and do a Zoom call with Bert. Yep, he can walk and chew gum. He's a good CFO versus driving to the airport, getting on a plane, and this all comes out of my own pocket, by the way, and flying to San Diego or Santa Barbara, meeting you in person, having lunch or dinner, getting to know you a little more than just a resume and a talking head, and then tell my client, I'm confident this person's going to come here or go to your company. They're going to stay there, and my guarantee is 1 year, and thus I can do that. If I didn't do that, I might have fallout, and I never want someone to contact me on a Sunday night. Hey, by the way, I'm going to give my notice tomorrow. When that happens, it's already too late. So I like to be proactive, and I follow the 5 Ps of prior preparation prevents poor performance. So when I'm evaluating candidates, I start at the very beginning. The initial contact I have with them could be an email, could be a text, could be a phone call, could be just their resume. And I've surveyed other recruiters. A lot of them, and clients too, they evaluate the individual after they're in front of them, whether it's a resume, in their lobby, in their office. I've already done 80% of the work. And I know that when someone walks into an interview after I've done a phone interview, perhaps a video interview or in-person interview, and then followed up and gone through their resume, I'm 75 to 80% certain they meet the qualifications and characteristics of what the client is looking to hire them for.
What kind of things can you tell? I picture you having lunch or dinner with somebody. I remember the old story of the IBM executives who would tell the waiter or make a deal with the restaurant. Okay, slip him $100 and okay, look, bring this guy something he doesn't like, or bring him something just his order's messed up, just because they want to see how the person handles it.
Sure.
You know, or they it's just something like that, or they look to see if he puts salt on the food before even tasting it, just to see, does this person look to see, or do they just, right. What kind of things do you, what tricky?
You're delving into my bag of tricks because I actually do that. And I've told Robert about this once or twice. Let's say I talk to an uptight CFO and he's on the phone, he's super intense. And when we have our interview after his resume, he's intense. I'm a very punctual person. I grew up in a very strict household. I will show up intentionally. I'll be at the restaurant 15 minutes early. I'll show up on late on purpose just to see what their reaction is.
Well, you'll show up late.
Yep.
To see what they do.
To see how they react. And I have some basic rules. If you're rude to wait staff, I'm not interested in speaking to you. If you're late for my meeting, there better be blood on your hands. And things happen. I've gotten a flat tire on the way to a meeting, those types of things. But I use a balance beam, a litmus test, and there's jelly beans on the right and jelly beans on the left. And as we're going through that process, if that person has a mistake in their resume, is late, snaps at a waiter or waitress, or is not polite, or whatever else might happen, that raises my red flag. And I give people 2 strikes. I love baseball, but 3 strikes are too many. So if anything happens during that process, and grant that there's situations that come up. I mean, my son, for example, allergic reaction at school. I might be late for a meeting, but I just got out of the ER because he had epinephrine because he ate some peanuts by accident, and I probably gave them to him by accident. So there's exceptions to the rule, but in general, I look for consistency. So if someone's going to be late for my phone interview, they're late for our video interview, they're late for our in-person interview, that's a sign. History will repeat itself. And same thing if someone's early, on time, they have their resume, I don't tell them to bring references, it's always good to have them, little things like that. So I kind of use that in the back of my mind as a barometer on how well they would be a fit. And if I have clients that are the same personality like that, I have to prep the candidates as well. And if someone doesn't enjoy someone being late, who does, but a minute or two is fine, or they want someone even keel and not a hothead, we're going to be able to delve into that before they're made an offer to know if that's going to be a conflict or not.
At what point do you actually go see them? I mean, are you obviously just going to see everybody up front, but you get you meet them. I imagine you obviously meet them here on Zoom, perhaps. You talk to them on the phone. You got the resume. You're down to what? Down to the final 3 maybe for this $150,000 job.
So the general rule of thumb is I try and contact between 30 and 50 people per search. Now, customer service, it won't be as difficult. president of a plastic and wood fiber polymer producer. Might be a little more challenging, but I like to have 5 resumes to show with the client. I rank them A, B, and Q. A is very good. B is good. Q is questionable, not sure yet. And present the top 3 to 5 resumes. I rank them for the client. I put together, remember the back of baseball cards? I put together a little stat sheet on them. Name, rank, serial number, education, personality type. Do they volunteer? How are their communication skills? All that. So they have a snapshot of all 3 candidates on a nice sheet of paper on their computer screen. And they say, yeah, you're right. Number 1 is an A. Number 2 is a B, B plus, and number 3 is a B, but we'll start at the top and interview A and go from there.
Does intuition have much to do with, is that in the mix?
It is to a certain extent, but I think it's learned intuition. And clients get interviewed by candidates as well. And I've had to coach up clients more than candidates to say, okay, Robert, I need to make sure you have this available for the candidate, and we need to have these things reserved so that everything flows smoothly. And I mean, everyone's being interviewed all the time. You know, whether you're going to meet a new doctor or you're getting your car looked at, you're evaluating the person you're dealing with. And so I try and do that throughout the process. And again, I'm not bragging about the retention rate. I'm sure there's some luck involved. There's some skill. And we're not New York City. This is Wisconsin and Minnesota. So it's not like you're going to have, somebody with a bad background that's going to try and slide in. But I'm very observant about people's characteristics and personality and how they react. And I just try and file that away. And am I wrong sometimes? When I was younger, yes, a lot, sometimes more often than not. But as I've matured and met more candidates, I've interviewed over 3,000 people in person. I'll say I'm wrong maybe 10 to 20% of the time. And that's only because maybe I haven't met the person. They couldn't meet me, or they're too far from where my client was to interview me, and we're in 3 different cities. But in general, my guts and my intuition after doing this for 20 plus years has been probably one of my best resources to leverage.
You use tests sometimes too, don't you?
Correct. So there's a couple different personality tests, and I always tell clients that shouldn't be thumbs up or thumbs down like Julius Caesar. That's just another tool in your toolbox to make an evaluation. And I think back, I used predictive index when I took it on behalf of a client so that I would know what the results were. And my HR consultant said, Terry, if you weren't a recruiter, you should be one now. So that stuff doesn't change. But the things she brought up were, I don't like mundane work. I like challenge. I like opportunity. Obviously, I like to speak to people. I like to learn about their backgrounds. And what would I do if I weren't a recruiter? I might be a college counselor, a career counselor, but we joke in the industry that recruiters are social workers that like money. So I have a person at company A, they're not happy. It's either low pay, commute, culture, management, glass ceiling. I'm the anti-Robin Hood. I take from the poor and give to the rich. So the rich companies are the ones that have a good culture. They've got good management, good leadership practices, good benefits, good perks for your employees. And it's not always just the benefits. It might be you can bring your dog to work, or you can be casual every Friday and business casual Monday to Thursday. So there's a lot of different factors that come into play. But I try and make sure, and basically what I say to myself is if I were going to go work for Burke and I'm a potential candidate, do I want to go work for his company? And if I do, you're probably a CRG client. If I don't, then I'm going to gracefully say, I don't think we can help you. Same thing on the candidate standpoint. I deal a lot with manufacturing companies. That's kind of my main focus. And if there were a CRG manufacturing company and I was looking to hire Burke or Robert for my company, if I wouldn't hire them for the fictitious Charles River Group, why would I refer them to the clients that are paying me a fee and I'm offering a 1-year guarantee on top of that?
Well, how long does it take typically to find somebody from the moment I call you up and say, I need a CFO or somebody?
Right.
And
Well, I hope I'm not being a bragger, but I've done some searches I've completed in 1 day.
wow.
Found an IT security administrator for a large law firm in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Contacted 3 candidates, 3 phone interviews, 3 phone screens. I met them all 3 the next day, back to back to back. Had an offer in less than a week. The worst case, I did a medical business development manager. So a person that was in sales, only selling medical building construction. I had to kiss about 250 frogs.
Oh,
and it was for a large $900 million construction company in Wisconsin over near Green Bay. And unfortunately, the person was located down south, but he was a Packer fan. So that was kind of the linchpin. And he had played football at Kansas, so he was definitely a diehard football fan. He was sick of the South and the hot weather, and it just worked out. But that was, I'm not, probably 90 to 95% no thank yous from everyone I contacted.
Wow.
But rejection is part of life. Whether you're a candidate, a client, a recruiter, whether you do what you guys do, rejection is part of life. Get used to it.
I was going to say, it seems like, we're being evaluated constantly. I'm in a Toastmaster club here. I was the president of the club for a bit, but I've been there about 5 years. And I tell people the stage fright, yes, you're being evaluated when you speak, and the evaluator gets up there and evaluates your speaking, your speech, and you just, I don't know, it's not get over it, but you just need to get used to it and accept that as a fact of life. But I was also going to ask you, so now that you've flown out to have lunch with somebody, but maybe they didn't take the job, I presume you've got this database of your own where if someone calls you up and say, I need a certain person that does this, you can go back into your database and say, I found this person, I like them. How much of that plays into
what you're... There is some of that, but because the job environment has changed so much over the past 5-10 years, it would be a situation where you might stay at your company for 5 or 10 years until I called about another job. But people are so transitionary now, that candidate may not be available. They may have taken another job. They might still be there. But what we call that in the industry is recycling. I don't really recycle candidates, but if I have a search, let's say it's in Chicago, and I have someone that maybe their personal life changed. They're in Milwaukee, they had kids growing up, et cetera, but now their kids are in college. They can commute to Chicago. They could move down there. Their situation changes, but I don't single them out and say these are the only people I'm going to pursue. Yeah. I'm going to start a fresh list of new candidates as well. I'll put them in the mix. I'll crack them and stack them, as a chiropractor would say. And then if they bubble up to the top and they're one of the top 3, I'll present them to the client. If they're not, then I certainly won't.
I just can imagine if you've gone to the trouble and the investment to fly out to meet somebody for lunch or dinner, you'd want to keep them somewhere in your list, because now you don't have to do that again because you've already done that. So
and I probably only have to fly out maybe 10, 15% of the time, because a lot of companies don't want to relocate, especially moving from the South to the North or East to the Midwest. So it's predominantly the candidates I find, unless they're what I call boomerang, they're moving back. So if they're in Wisconsin, Minnesota, Illinois, in the Big Ten states, it's not an issue for me to meet with them in person. When I do have a boomerang, though, I will still interview them, but I know they're coming back. And if it's for money, it's not a good fit. So one gentleman I'm thinking about hiring him as VP of sales at a company in Western Wisconsin, an agricultural tire remanufacturer. They remake tires for the big stuff you see on the sides of the roads. And he said, I'm motivated because my mom just got over cancer. I'm in Cleveland. She's in Eau Claire, Wisconsin. This company's 30 miles away. And the client knew they wanted him. And they said, his base is 150, but if you can be here in a week, it's 160. So I called him back to follow up, and I said, what are you doing? He said, I'm packing my car right now. So it worked out. I don't know that I would have used that as a carrot, but they wanted him right away. He knew that. He wanted to be by his family, and money was not a motivating factor for him. It was location, the opportunity, and obviously the position itself.
And wow. Terry, you tend not to look for the unemployed, and some companies are source companies. Can you talk about that?
Sure. So, a million years ago, when I first started recruiting, I was still pretty green. We used to say that when you posted an ad in the newspaper and then eventually Monster.com, you typically got the unhappy, the unemployed, or the unemployable. I like to add the underemployed. So I will source companies. And again, I hope I'm not on a stage here, but there was one company that weren't a client of mine. I didn't want them as a client. They had 4,000 employees. I spent almost the entire month of December calling every single engineer from the company day after day, 20 in the morning, 20 in the afternoon, for probably 3 straight weeks. They had eliminated their ESOP, so people were having a stage fright. They were getting ready to leave anyway. And a lot of recruiters take off after Thanksgiving until January 1st. To me, that's money-making time. People still need to have a new job. They want to get hired. And if a recruiter's not going to work those couple of weeks, I don't mind less competition. So what resulted out of that, though, is I got about 8 new hires, salaries between probably 65 and 95,000. And it was arduous. It was day after day. I had the phone number memorized. I could still repeat it back to you. But I got really good at that really quick and got some really good hires, and everyone was happy.
Do you advertise? I mean, where do you advertise for candidates, or if you did, where would you do that? I could
No,
imagine
not typically.
this
I
is
have,
not a good idea, but
and I've had a corporate role where I've done online advertising, LinkedIn, Indeed, and JobBot, and all this other stuff. I'm not lazy, but I don't want to sift through. To me, at least, I would rather cold call 10 people and get 8 no's and find 2 rock stars, or 50 people, than to look at 75 resumes, find some other people that are pretty good, and deal with all the paperwork and all the hassle of going through those. I'm sure the younger generation, they prefer to post and praise, what we call it. I'd rather bet on myself and find the best people I can through cold calling, networking, and obviously I do some searches online and some internet researching.
How many calls can you make in an hour when you're prepped up and rocking and rolling?
I don't like to talk about myself now that I'm from the Midwest. If I was still out east, I'd say, well, if you held a gun in my head, I probably could do 60 cold calls in one day with a little break, maybe 75 if I was super assertive.
60, 60.
60, correct.
I think you got a pretty tight script when you call up.
I do. I polish up, I work on it, I retrofit it. If it doesn't work after the first 5 or 10 calls, I throw it away and I start anew and I come up with something else that I think will be valuable. And Robert said I should record myself because sometimes I've come up with something that's incredible. And after I do it 15 or 20 times, I kind of re-engineer it. And it's like, what did I start out with? So, but that's the flexibility of being in this business. Recruiters work all different ways, all different levels of success. It just depends on how they want to scale the fish, basically.
What kind of candidates are you engineering? You said biomedical construction, which is I can certainly imagine is a specialty. Do you have
Right.
a
That was very
specialty
specialized.
or a collection of specialties that you
The focus is
specialize in?
engineering, and I don't do anything in the biomedical field. The hub is in New England, ironically, where my twin brother is a drug engineer, and I'm just not interested in learning that industry. And if you're not in New England, they don't respect you, even if you're in Chicago or LA. So it's just not really a good investment of my time, but primarily manufacturing, from little niche companies that make movable bridge parts up to companies that actually make girders for construction. I've got one client that makes famous wool insulated winter hats and mittens, and now dog clothing for the winter, and dog beds and stuff. They've done so a lot of small, medium-sized niche clients. I don't want to work for the IBMs of the world or the companies where they've got 15, 20 in-house recruiters. They've got a couple of people on the outside like me that they retain. And I'm kind of an afterthought of, yeah, we'll give you a shot at this, but there's 4 recruiters working on it internally. There's 2 other recruiters we've hired as third parties, and you can have what's left over. I'm competitive, probably to a fault, but I don't need to do that where I am. If I'll tell a client, hire me, give me 2 weeks. If you don't have resumes in 2 weeks, fire me. And I've never had that not happen. I do whatever it takes, which is sometimes not good for my health, but my name's on the invoice and my company name's on the letterhead, so it's got to be done, and it's got to be done by me or one of my associates in either Minnesota, Southern Wisconsin, Lincolnshire, Illinois, or Stevens Point, Wisconsin.
Now, do you charge an upfront fee of some kind? I know you get a commission on the back.
Correct. We charge a small engagement fee, and everyone's heard of a retainer. A retainer is you write a check for $5,000 and whatever comes out of the laundry is what you owe or you get back.
Yeah.
We have something called a container, which is a contingency agreement, which means you don't pay us until the person gets hired. But the tanner part of the retainer is we want something up front to cover the expense of the phone interviews, the meals, breakfast, mileage, tollways, whatever, to interview these people. And rather than have 4 people in HR go through the process, I can serve them up on a silver platter. They've been phone interviewed, they've had a Zoom interview and an in-person interview. I've reviewed their resume, and I've gone over typically their LinkedIn profile or background. I've checked to see who else they might know, checked their pedigree. So they literally can have a turnkey candidate show up Monday at 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, and 2 o'clock, and all have gone through my process successfully.
Tell us about purple squirrels.
Well, that's a famous recruiter term, and I know that it's kind of been genericized. A purple squirrel is a candidate that can't be found. you want a PhD in molecular biology from MIT and and you want them in Little Wausau, Wisconsin.
And
That's
they've
not
been a Navy,
possible. And I've had
Navy
clients,
SEAL, and they have a truck driver's license. Yeah, so all the yeah.
but I mean, that does happen. And I have to bring clients down to earth and say, hey, you're not going to get this person. Your salary's off, your package is up. We can make adjustments, but I can't invent someone. It's not McDonald's. I can't go up and get you a Big Mac with no onions. You have to tell me what you're willing to pay and what you want, what the must-haves are versus nice to have. And if it's a must-have, and I can go through the market and say, I've contacted 60 people, none of these molecular biologists want to work in central Wisconsin for a salary of 105, even if there's a 30% bonus. So it's a lot of partnering with the client versus coming in and saying, well, Burke, here's what you have to hire. You have to have this, this, and this, and here's what you need to hire them for. You know your business better than me, but I know recruiting better than the client. So it's an ebb and flow of that. And eventually, in the end, we have the right mix of skills for what the client's looking for, people skills as well as technical skills as well.
Can somebody call you up? I know in our business plan, we've got the whole HR section where you're planning the people you need. And I'm thinking, okay, I need a CFO, I need a CTO, I need some customer service people, I need these other people. How much do I think I need to pay them? Is that something you can consult on? Or
I can. And there's professionals that do actually salary surveys. That's what their role is. And there's some third parties I can go online and I can call somebody and say, hey, can you tell me what a sales manager in manufacturing in Wisconsin would pay? And they can tell me large metro area, small metro area, mid-size area. Here's roughly what the range is. Here's the median. And here's typically what the bonus or the commission plan is as well.
Wow. Can AI do any of that, or is that something that AI just can't?
Maybe I'm not going to worry about that. The thing that I do though, and it's pro bono for the client, if I'm going to call 50 CFOs, let's say, I'm going to try and get each one of them to tell me at least roughly what their salary is. So let's just say only 10 of the 50 tell me. I can tell the client, hey, Mr. Client, I did this survey while I recruited these people. They aren't all candidates, but of the 10 I contacted, 8 were over 130, one was over 140, and one was above 150.
So you're going to have to pay what and throw in some perks and some other things. And I mean, I imagine the candidate would tell you, I'll move if, I'm making 130 now, but if you get me 150 plus, I could bring my dog to the office. I get a country club membership and a new car, maybe a truck where you guys are, whatever it is.
That's true.
And Terry, when someone's a rock star, even when they're not too far out of college, how do you figure that stuff out?
I like to refer back. I went to college graduation, saw the president of Moderna speak at the commencement at Minnesota. His name is Stefan Mankel. And he basically said to all the graduates, when you interview for a job or you become a hiring manager and interview people, if you, at the end of the interview, don't want to have dinner with them, which is usually call it an hour and a half dinner, they're probably not a good match for you or vice versa. So, and Robert's known some candidates that I've hired that he's met through me. I meet someone in 5 minutes after I have their resume and I spoke to them on the phone even for 5 minutes. Between when we enter a restaurant for breakfast, lunch, or dinner and order, I know if they're a rock star or not. And am I wrong? Seldom, just because I'm so honed in on what they're like and their demeanor, and just I'm kind of on steroids when I'm interviewing people to make sure I cover every base of what they have to offer the client.
And how much time do you spend? Don't you compress the amount of time just by how you manage the process?
Yeah, I mean, I can be as quick and fast as clients and or candidates want, and I can take my time. You know me well enough. I really don't like to waste time, but if a client wants to go a little slower, that's not a problem for me whatsoever.
Like if Burke needed, let's say, an operational person to free Burke up so he could do some world travel and find even more money to grow his company, you would be able to talk to him, dial it in, profile it out, and then start looking? Is it that simple?
As we say in recruiting, simple to comprehend, difficult to execute.
Okay.
Yeah. What are your, say, top 3 favorite interview questions that really you think really reveals the person's character?
Sure. So if you don't mind, I'm going to well, I won't turn the tables on you guys, but I was going to say I could ask you some of these,
Do
but
that.
I'll definitely ask you a simple one later. But one of the best ones I like to ask is, who do you admire most in your line of work, whether it's insurance, manufacturing, sales, IT? If you were to ask me, I could tell you Robert already knows the answer. And then another question I like to ask people is, if you could do it all over again, what would you have done differently? Different college, different major, different physical location. And that gets people to open up. A lot of people still do closed-ended non-behavioral interview questions. Burke, do you have a CPA? Burke, do you know how to use Excel? Versus, what's your favorite tool when you're doing financial analysis, whether it's your own product or something else? So it's really having open-ended questions and let people tell you about themselves, both the good, the bad, and the ugly. Sometimes people will say things that they maybe shouldn't say in an interview, but that's why I interview them first, to make sure that I'm aware of that. And my third question, which I don't want to put on the gun, but I'm always reading interview books as a hobby, which is sort of a goofball thing to do, but I just enjoy it.
Geeking out
And one
on
of
it.
the best casual interview questions I ever was asked was, if you could be any type of Disney character, who would it be and why?
Wow.
I'd have to think about that. I was going to say
Sure.
one of my favorites is, and I hiring this, but who I thought was the poster child for a VP of sales. And one of the questions asked him says, "So tell me about a mistake you made and what you learned from it." And he goes, "Oh, I don't make mistakes." I'm thinking, of course, the mistake I made to answer that question myself would be I hired the guy.
Exactly.
Oh no.
Exactly.
Oh yeah, I had to can him because he was yeah. Well,
And
when every
unfortunately, in corporate America, a lot of HR professionals, I'll put an asterisk there, they have a standard set of concrete questions they always ask,
yeah.
and they don't change them even if the situation or the circumstances change. And that's, I think, one of my best skills is I'm able to change midstream and focus on something financial or IT or manufacturing. And I tell people I have palm oil dish hands. I don't own any tools, but my twin brother's a biomedical engineer. So if I have engineering questions, I will ask him. But it's actually to my advantage because I can play dumb. I'm not a CFO, but Burke, by the time you get done with my interview, I'll know enough to present you to my client to know that you're the right person for the job after we cover all the details of what you do.
What about having we've got one of our members on our team here is a CFO. And I think of like if I was hiring a CFO, sort of I would call you up and say, Terry, I need help with the CFO. But I'd also want Fred as a CFO himself, to interview my CFO because
Sure.
I'm gonna ask questions that I want, I'm looking for I'm gonna, make them better than they are. And I want someone who can really find out, are they really ready, willing, and can they do this job?
What
So
I've done is, because I'm not obviously CFO, but I have other people I can rely on that will do an interview for their specialty. If they're an electrical engineer, I can really plug in a toaster. So I'll have an engineer that I know that's got an electrical engineering background. So do you mind spending 50 minutes on the phone with this person? Whether it's about programming or embedded systems or something else that I know enough about to be dangerous, I'll let them take the lead and say, here's what I found out. Or if it's something I'm more comfortable with and the client has maybe a little apprehension about the personality, I'll say, you know what, I have an HR consultant I work with. She's retired. She has no vested interest in my success or failure. She'll interview this person and we'll agree that whatever her decision is, thumbs up or thumbs down, that'll be the decision that you make and I have to live with.
How
So then
about
it's taken out of my hands, and then a professional third party that knows more than I do can give them their stamp of approval or reject them.
but you've teed up the person for that, so you've done your job that way.
Correct. Right. I don't like surprises.
Yeah, no.
and
Or,
then you've hired whole companies, right? Like the head of the company, the next in line. You've like
Sure.
reshaped. So that means you're thinking team building and matches. How much does that come into play?
I wish it was more often these days, but there have been situations where I've actually helped build an entire team. One of my proudest ones was a client. I sold the owner of the business who bought it, and I hired him as president, and then I hired his entire management team. He bought it for, let's just say, 3 million. He sold it with 13 million in a backlog of work, and obviously there's a multiplier. So he did very well. And I believe every person but one person I hired there is still at the company even after it got sold. And the company's been in business since he bought it, probably 10, 12 years total.
wow. What kind of questions do you ask? ascertain if, I mean, they can be qualified and all the other technically correct things. How do you tell if someone's fundamentally honest? How do you, like, this person's straight shooter, they, all that.
Sure. I can give you a good example. I just hired a safety manager at a client, and we met after work. And speaking of setting people up, I met him in a bar on purpose. I met him at the bar. He only ordered soda. And I said, I'm done working. It's 7 o'clock at night. I'm going to have a beer. Do you want one? Nope. I'm on an interview. I thought, okay, good. Got done with the interview. I thought, this guy's a nice guy, good guy, seems honest. But then he told me something that impressed me. He said, my 95-year-old mother lives with me and my wife. I take her out gambling one night a week for a beer, and she spends $25. And I don't know about you guys, but we only got one mom, right? And so, I mean, if he's that good to his mother, how good is he going to be to his employer? And I found out after the fact, I mean, he'd been in the paper industry for 20 years, which will grind you up and spit you out. He told me, Terry, I was so excited to go to work before the company got dissolved. I'd be on my deck in the morning at 4:30 a.m. drinking coffee so I wouldn't waking my wife because I wanted to go to work. There's that famous saying by Emerson, nothing great was ever achieved without enthusiasm. That's how I know this guy's a good fit. And you can't see now, but I'm getting goosebumps telling you this because he's been there about a month and the client loves him and it worked out perfect.
Wow. What do you do when someone, I mean, when someone is not a fit, or well, they're there, they're like, I don't like this job, I want to quit, and you want to keep, of course, your retention score there. But I mean, do they call you? I mean, I imagine they don't tell their employer because they don't want to have that conversation. Do they call you and say, Terry, I hate it here, get me out of here? Or what happens usually, and what do you tell them?
That happens so seldom because I go and meet the client. I tour the facility. I see the people in the plant. I see the people in the office. I'm huge observationalist, even though I talk quite a bit. But when I'm at a client, I keep my mouth shut, my ears and eyes open. I'm walking through the plant. Do the staff members try and look busy because the owner's walking by or the president? Or do they just treat him like he's another employee? Hey, Burke, how's it going? Yeah, it was a good game last night, and keep working at their job. So it's seldom I'm surprised that the candidate doesn't like the employer. There have been limited situations. First, I want to try and positively affect it. Can we do something different? Is it the management style? Is it the bedside manner? Is it the type of software they're using? Is it something that can be fixed? If it can't be fixed, it can't be fixed. And I'm the first one to own up to it and say, okay, this person's leaving in a couple of weeks. Now I have 2 guns held to my head to find the replacement free of charge. And then I want the other person that's leaving to have a good feeling about going someplace else, whether I can help them or not. And then I want the employer who wrote me the check in the first place to be happy in the long run.
Terry, no, we don't have much more time left. And this has went pretty fast. What final thought would you like to leave today? And please remind people how they can find you.
Sure. First off, so the website is charlesrivergroup.com, all lowercase, all one stream. And I think probably the best advice I can give anyone looking to hire a person is put yourself in their shoes. And I've interviewed people, all different types of walks of life. I mean, one of my most unique searches was a bilingual English, Mandarin, Chinese speaking electrical engineer. I told the client, put yourself in his shoes. He's from China. He lived in Canada. He's in Wisconsin now. Try and be polite. I gave them some tips about how to treat Asian professionals as far as being gratuitous and offering a small gift and token, etc. So just in closing, treat the people the way you want to be treated and put yourself in the other person's shoes. If you're the employer, look at the candidate's perspective. And if you're a candidate, look at the employer as well, because the job market's not going to get any easier. It's going to get more difficult. And so we need to just be respectful of other people, where they come from, what they know, and hopefully they can be a good fit for an employer long term.
Any last question, Burke?
All good stuff. I mean, I've hired and fired some people, and of course I would say the firing is not what you're about, but what I would say to people about firing is make sure the cardinal rule there would be, or the prime directive would be, do it in a way where they save face, where they,
right.
You've got to do, that's the part that you mentioned, bedside manner. That's the part where they'll come after you. Is if you do it badly and you embarrass them or shame them or whatever you call that, they're going to be pissed and they're going to just want to sue you. But you want to do it with grace. And
right. Well, on top of that, there's a saying about when you have a good experience, you tell 10 people. You have a bad experience, you tell 100 people. So if work. If you fired me today, which you have every right to, and it wasn't handled in, from my perspective, as professional as possible, I'm probably going to tell 99 other people, I went to work at this company and maybe it was partly my fault, but they sure didn't act professional at the end. And that's when people have a lasting taste in their mouth.
Yeah, I don't think someone's going to cop to it. Maybe it's my fault. They're just going to say, I work for these idiots and they're idiots and I hate them and you should stay away. And I heard
Exactly.
the number. If they liked you, they'll tell 3. If they don't like you, they'll tell like 13 to 20. But yeah, I mean, yeah, they'll go out of their way to just stick it to you. And that's I think
Right.
that's really the thing you don't want to have happen because you can't afford that. Especially
They
in
Exactly. You only have one reputation. You want to keep it crystal clear if you can.
Yeah, that's been the heart pulse of Terry's business for 20 years because he's built all these relationships and he's helped a lot of people many times, even when he wasn't compensated. So it, including people's kids and going to their ball games, he works it in a lot of different ways. But Terry, it's great having you on. It's again, Terry Brown with the CharlesRiverGroup.com. Thank you so much. This has been valuable.
Great. Thanks for having me today, guys. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Terry.
Thank you,
Good hearing from you. Learned a lot from you here. I'll have to call you up when I need some people here.
That'd be great. Always want new clients.
Yeah, man.
Thanks, everyone.
All right, everyone, let's finish up this show for the day. I'm Burke Franklin. We've got Robert Browning and Terry Brown from Charles River Group. That's Charles River Group, 3words.com for recruiting expertise. And we're with Prepping for the Sharks. So join us every week for another show or check us out on YouTube or our website, preppingforthesharks.com. Thanks for watching.
Thank you.